Okay, so I would like to share with you guys a beautiful story about a beautiful Tibetan yogi. His name is Milarepa. He is somewhat of a legend in Tibet. Okay, he's a legendary yogi. You know how you have Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan? Well, Milarepa is the equivalent of that in Tibet, in Tibetan Buddhism. Okay, he's the legendary super yogi, and he's got a really interesting story, and I want to tell you guys the story. I've heard it from a Tibetan Lama on YouTube. Really cool Tibetan Lama. He's got an American accent actually, and he was born and raised in America, but he's a straight out Tibetan Lama, and he's been initiated by the Dalai Lama. And so I'll just kind of recite what I remember from the story. So I might not be getting the details 100% correct, but nevertheless I'll give you the gist of it. So Milarepa was born and raised in Tibet, and he was a criminal. Okay, he was a criminal in his younger days, and he had some problems with his cousins, and his mom told him to go and kill a bunch of his cousins and a bunch of people, and he did that, and he was just a really mean and nasty person. Okay, a really mean and nasty person. So was a criminal, a murderer, and by a stroke of good fortune he found himself gravitating towards monastic life. Okay, he realized, wow, I've done some really terrible things. I think the only thing that could save me is to go and join a monastery. Now, in Tibet, monks who live a monastic life are, very, very respected. So it's sort of like it was a last resort. He was such a bad criminal that he said, well, I think the only thing for me left to do now is to go and become a monk. That is my only doorway to salvation. And it's kind of like in Tibet, so kind of like how here in North America, business and finance and capitalism is like sort of highly respected, right? Gives you social status. Well, over there in Tibet, the culture is very spiritual. So it's like, when you think about it, last resort, let me go and become a monk kind of thing. So Milarepa says, okay, I'm going to go become a monk. And joins the monastery, gets accepted. Now, he's faced with a teacher, his guru. I can't remember his name. Another legendary yogi. And this is all in the 10th, 11th century. So anyway, his teacher, his guru, was known to be very, very gentle. Okay, he was a gentle, very compassionate, sage type person. However, he was very mean with Milarepa. Very mean. I mean, extremely mean, and I think he even abused him physically. He would hit him with a stick. He was just like super mean to Milarepa. And of course, Milarepa resented that, because here is this criminal. What do you think? What type of person do you think a murderer is? Very egotistical, very selfish, and wants things his way. And so Milarepa was very resentful, especially how he sees that his teacher is treating everyone so gently. But when it came to Milarepa, he was like abusing him even physically, like hitting him with a stick. And playing mind games with him. And one of the mind games that his teacher played with him was, he would tell him to go build a house, I believe. Okay, a house or a tower, something. I think in the version that I heard from the Tibetan Lama on YouTube, it's a house. But I read online that it's also a tower. So let's just say it's a house. And he would make him build a house. And, you're building a house with hands. Then, after he built the house, he'd come in and say, well, the window is out of proportion. Redo the entire house. And then he would, think about it. You spent maybe a month or two building a house. Somebody comes up to you, looks at this little thing, and then says, build the house again. And it kept happening, and it kept frustrating Milarepa, frustrating him over and over and over and over. I mean, imagine, and I think it went up to 13 times or something. Okay, this was over a course of many years. Build a house and rebuild it, build a house and rebuild it. And at the beginning, Milarepa's frustration would build up and build up and build up. And, then he would go again, do it again. And what his guru was trying to do in the process is he was trying to get him to lose his ego, lose his identity of having things to go his way. If you've watched Game of Thrones, this was very similar to Arya's training, actually. You could think of Milarepa's training as very similar. I made a video in the past I called it, "Is Arya Stark a Buddhist monk?" Because that's actually like very similar to some Buddhist monk training, some, not all. Okay, like I said, in this case, his guru was very gentle to everybody else except for Milarepa. He treated him a lot like the faceless men trained Arya. Very similar. They would hit you with a stick, and that type of training. So he was trying to, and what was Arya's training? Arya's training was to become no one, and that's the type of training that he was trying to train Milarepa, to lose his attachments to how things should be, to become part of the whole, part of the community, accept things as they are. And so he was doing that specifically with Milarepa because this is a selfish criminal, somebody who has a big ego, somebody who's angry, gets angry, is resentful. And his teacher, his guru, would sit at night and pray for Milarepa because he was doing this out of compassion. He was being very tough with him. Why? Here's the interesting part. This is what I'm alluding to in all of this. Because his teacher, now these guys are very high people. They're able to see into the future. They're able to see into possibilities. They're, very conscious people. He said that if Milarepa doesn't get his act together, his karma is so heavy, he's going to be born 3 realms below. So the human realm is the 5th. So he would have been born, I believe, in not hell, but perhaps one of the lower realms. He said he would be born in a lower realm, 3 realms below. That's how bad things were for Milarepa. That's how bad his street cred was in the amusement park. He was going to be born 3 realms below. 3 realms. And his teacher, his guru, had so much compassion for him, he didn't want that to happen. Now, the nice thing about Tibetan Buddhism is that they believe that one could achieve enlightenment in one lifetime. But you would have to be totally dedicated for it, in which case Milarepa was. Despite his resentment and anger, he was dedicated for the process. And eventually, after the 13th time, I believe, it was the 13th or something like that, finally, his guru said, well, that's a good house. You don't have to start over again and rebuild it. And eventually, Milarepa would go on to meditate in a cave and eventually achieve enlightenment in one lifetime. So he went from on the verge of having such a heavy karma that he was going to be reborn 3 realms below to being fully Buddha, fully enlightened in one lifetime. So often we talk about this game, the enlightenment game, the consciousness becoming one again with source. We often talk about it and we say, it's going to take you many lifetimes. You progress little by little each life. But that's not how it works exactly. Because the way God consciousness goes back to itself, just like because it's infinite, there are an infinite number of arrangements in which all its different parts go back to the source. So for some, like Milarepa, it'll happen very dramatically, very drastically, in exponential growth, exponential awakening, exponential evolution in one lifetime. And then for somebody else, it'll be very, very, very slow and gradual, gradual, little by little. So there's no telling. I read a thing from Ram Dass on his Instagram. He says you can't really get enlightened. You can't force it. It only happens by grace. And you could say that in that particular case, grace graced Milarepa to go from having such heavy karma, being a murderer, and having to be born in 3 realms below, to getting enlightened in one lifetime. You see? So you never know. That's the moral of the story here, is you never know. You never know, folks. Because God is infinite, consciousness is infinite. Therefore, it has an infinite number of ways of finding ways of doing everything, including going back to itself. You see? So very cool, very, very cool story. I really loved it and wanted to share it with you guys. Tibetan Buddhism is fascinating. It really fascinates me, and I think it's the trippiest out of all the Buddhist schools. Like, it's really trippy. It's tantric, right? So they tantric is basically they use the environment around them, and they're really something. Tibetans are really something. They're also the afterlife experts, and you hear about all these stories of Tibetan yogis flying and levitating and doing all kinds of things. You don't hear much about that in Zen, because Zen is more about being here now, present. Tibetan Buddhism is also about that, but it's also much more than that. They're all about the siddhis too, the spiritual powers, and they use it. Wim Hof learned Tumo meditation from Tibetans. That's how he's able to do his feats. He learned Tumo. Tumo meditation is a way of generating heat and overcoming cold. So anyway, really, really cool stuff. I want to thank all the Patreons for supporting this channel. You guys are awesome. You guys are amazing. Thank you very much. If you would like to pledge your support with as little as $2 a month, honestly, I want to thank all the new people that have been joining lately. It's amazing with the families growing, and I'm very confident that we will be able to do this full time very soon. And if you would like to contribute, you put in $2 a month, you forget about it. Forget about it. Okay, that's it. And then, you help out your one of your favorite content creators here, right? That's about it, guys. Until next time, may the force be with you.